The most dangerous lie you've been told isn't about money, relationships, or career success. It's the belief that you already know who you are. This isn't about self-improvement or positive thinking. This isn't about rejecting society or becoming a hermit on a mountain. This is about something far more profound and terrifying. The recognition that the person you believe yourself to be is nothing more than a carefully constructed fiction, a character you've been playing so convincingly that you've forgotten it's just a role. You're sitting across from someone at dinner, nodding along to a conversation about weekend plans and mortgage rates, when suddenly you feel it, that strange sensation of watching yourself from outside, as if you're an actor who momentarily forgot their lines. The words coming out of your mouth feel foreign, the smile feels painted on, and for just a moment, you wonder who is actually speaking. This isn't dissociation or mental illness. This is the first whisper of what Joseph Campbell called the hero's awakening, the moment when the soul begins to stir beneath layers of social conditioning and inherited expectations. Campbell understood that this awakening doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrives as a growing sense of disconnection from the life you've built, a feeling that you're living someone else's dream while your own remains buried under years of shoulds and musts. And that's just how things are done. You look around at your carefully curated existence, the job that pays well but feels empty, the relationships that function but lack depth, the achievements that impressed others but left you strangely hollow, and you begin to suspect that you've been living a life designed by committee, where every major decision was made to satisfy someone else's definition of success. The mythologist knew that this moment of recognition is simultaneously the most natural thing in the world and the most dangerous. Natural because your authentic self has been waiting patiently beneath all the personas you've adopted, ready to emerge the moment you stop suffocating it with other people's expectations. Dangerous because once you see the bars of the cage you've been living in, you can never fully return to unconsciousness. The spell has been broken. You begin to notice things that others seem unable to see, the way conversations follow predictable scripts, touching only the surface of what it means to be human, the way people's faces light up when they speak of their dreams, then dim when they return to discussing their obligations. This is what Campbell called the departure from the ordinary world, but it's not a physical journey. It's an internal revolution that begins when you stop accepting other people's definitions of who you're supposed to be and start questioning everything you've been taught about success, happiness, and the purpose of human existence. You realize that the ordinary world isn't just your physical environment, it's the entire matrix of beliefs, assumptions, and automatic behaviors that keep you trapped in patterns that serve everyone except your soul. The hero's journey Campbell mapped across thousands of myths and stories isn't happening in some distant fairy tale kingdom. It's happening right now, in your own consciousness, as you begin to distinguish between the voice of your conditioning and the voice of your deeper wisdom. The call to adventure isn't asking you to quit your job or abandon your responsibilities. It's asking you something far more challenging. Are you willing to discover who you are when you strip away all the identities you've accumulated, all the roles you've been playing, all the stories you've been telling yourself about what your life should look like? Most people spend their entire lives avoiding this question because they sense correctly that answering it will change everything. Once you begin to live from your authentic center, rather than from the expectations of others, you can't go back to sleepwalking through your days. You can't pretend that the conversations that once satisfied you still hold meaning. You can't perform the old routines with the same unconscious ease. The person you thought you were must die for the person you actually are to be born, and this death, Campbell knew, is both the most necessary and the most frightening passage in human existence. The call to adventure that Campbell wrote about doesn't arrive as a dramatic external event, though it can manifest that way. More often, it comes as a growing restlessness, a sense that the life you've constructed, however successful it might appear to others, is somehow not your life at all. You find yourself standing in your perfectly appointed home, surrounded by all the things you thought you wanted, feeling like a stranger in your own existence. This isn't ingratitude or depression. This is your soul's refusal to continue the charade of living, as if your current role encompasses the totality of who you are. Campbell understood that this internal call is simultaneously the most natural thing in the world and the most challenging to answer. It's natural because your authentic self has been waiting patiently beneath all the layers of conditioning, ready to emerge the moment you stop suffocating it with other people's definitions of success and happiness. Challenging because stepping into authenticity means stepping away from the crowd, and stepping away from the crowd means accepting a kind of solitude that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. But here's what Campbell discovered in his lifelong study of mythic patterns. The solitude you fear isn't loneliness at all, it's initiation. In the silence between your thoughts, in the space between your heartbeats, in the pause between your inhalation and exhalation, you begin to hear voices that the noise of the ordinary world drowns out. Not the voices of madness, but the voices of wisdom that have been trying to reach you your entire life. The voice of your intuition, which knows things your rational mind hasn't figured out yet. The voice of your creativity, which sees connections and possibilities that conventional thinking can't perceive. The voice of your deepest knowing, which understands that the path to authentic living has never been a group journey. This is why Campbell insisted that the hero must often journey alone, at least initially. Not because connection with others isn't important, it's essential, but because you can only offer authentic connection when you've first connected authentically with yourself. The relationships you build from this place of inner knowing are qualitatively different from the relationships you maintain to avoid loneliness or gain social approval. They're based on genuine recognition rather than mutual need, on shared exploration rather than shared escape, on the joy of witnessing another person's authentic self rather than the relief of having your false self validated. What happens in this space of conscious solitude is something Campbell described with profound insight. You discover that you're not alone at all. You're finally in relationship with yourself, and from this place of inner companionship, you begin to perceive the interconnected nature of all existence. The trees outside your window aren't just objects in a landscape. They're fellow beings engaged in their own form of authentic living, growing toward light not because they should, but because that's what trees do. The stranger passing on the street isn't just another face in the crowd. They're another consciousness navigating their own hero's journey, facing their own call to authenticity, wrestling with their own resistance to becoming who they really are. Campbell recognized that this shift in perception is the beginning of real spiritual maturity. You begin to see that every person you encounter is engaged in the same fundamental struggle between their conditioned self and their authentic self, between the safety of conformity and the risk of genuine living. Your judgment of others softens because you understand that their resistance to awakening is the same resistance you face in yourself. Your compassion deepens because you recognize that everyone is doing the best they can with the level of consciousness they currently possess. If you're recognizing your own journey in these words, if you're feeling both the terror and the exhilaration of this path toward authenticity, I want you to know that your courage matters more than you might realize. Every person who chooses to live authentically gives others permission to do the same. Your willingness to face your own conditioning makes it easier for others to face theirs. Your commitment to being real in a world that rewards pretense is a gift not just to yourself, but to everyone whose life you touch. Share with us in the comments where you are on this journey, not because we need your engagement, but because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to take their own first step into authenticity. We're not building an audience here. We're creating a circle of fellow travelers, each on our own unique path but walking in the same direction, toward truth, toward meaning, toward the person we came here to become. Once you've crossed the threshold into this territory of authentic self-discovery, Campbell knew that the real work begins. And the first thing you discover, often with a mixture of relief and dismay, is that the path toward authenticity is ancient, worn smooth by countless seekers who came before you, yet somehow each person must walk it alone, making their own unique discoveries along the way. The tests that await you in this inner landscape are unlike any challenges you faced in the ordinary world, because they're not designed to help you succeed according to external standards. They're designed to reveal who you are when all external validation falls away. The first test is the test of solitude itself. Most people are so afraid of being alone with themselves that they'll accept almost any level of inauthenticity to avoid it. They'll stay in relationships that have long since died, pursue careers that drain their souls, maintain friendships based on habit rather than genuine connection, all to avoid the profound terror of discovering who they are when no one is watching. when no one is judging, when no one is there to tell them whether they're doing it right. But in the hero's journey, solitude isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's in the silence of your own company that you begin to distinguish between the voice of your conditioning and the voice of your wisdom. The second test is more subtle, but perhaps more challenging, learning to discern between genuine spiritual insight and spiritual ego. Campbell was acutely aware of this danger, having observed countless seekers who escaped the prison of social conditioning only to trap themselves in new forms of superiority and self-righteousness. The person who sees through society's illusions can become intoxicated with their own clarity, forgetting that awakening is meant to increase compassion, not create separation. True spiritual maturity reveals itself not in the ability to judge others' unconsciousness, but in the capacity to hold space for everyone's journey with infinite patience and understanding. But it's in what Campbell called the approach to the inmost cave that the most profound test awaits. Here in the deepest part of your inner journey, you encounter the shadows you've spent your entire life avoiding. Not just the obvious shadows of anger, fear, or shame, but the more subtle shadows of spiritual pride, of the need to be special, of the attachment to being the one who sees what others don't. You discover that even your awakening can become another identity to cling to, another way of avoiding the radical vulnerability of simply being human. The inmost cave is the place where you must release even your attachment to being awakened, where you must die to every version of yourself you've ever constructed, including the version that considers itself enlightened. And it's precisely in this space of ultimate surrender that you discover what Campbell called the allies, not necessarily external mentors or companions, though those may appear, but the inexhaustible resources of your own being. Your capacity for joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. Your ability to love that doesn't require reciprocation. Your sense of purpose that emerges not from external achievement, but from the simple fact of your existence. These allies have been with you all along, but you couldn't access them while you were busy being someone else, while you were performing for an audience that was never really paying attention anyway. What you discover in the depths of authentic self-encounter is that the treasure Campbell wrote about, the elixir that the hero brings back to heal the world, isn't something you have to acquire or achieve. It's something you already are, beneath all the layers of conditioning and expectation, beneath all the identities you've worn and the roles you've played. The rare connections you form from this place of inner wholeness are unlike anything you experienced in the ordinary world. They're not based on mutual need or shared neurosis, but on mutual recognition of the divine spark that exists within every human being. These relationships don't drain your energy, they multiply it. They don't require you to be anyone other than who you are. They celebrate the uniqueness of your authentic expression. If you're feeling both seen and challenged by these reflections, if you're recognizing the tests and allies of your own inner journey, please share with us what shadows you're learning to embrace, what allies you're discovering within yourself. Your courage to be real in a world of pretense is medicine, not just for your own soul, but for the collective healing our world desperately needs. We need your authentic voice, your unique gifts, your willingness to be genuinely human in an age of artificial everything. The final stage of Campbell's hero's journey is often misunderstood, particularly in our culture's obsession with dramatic endings and clear resolutions. The return isn't a triumphant homecoming where the hero is celebrated and everything goes back to normal. Instead, it's something far more subtle and far more challenging. Learning to live in the ordinary world while carrying the extraordinary wisdom gained in the depths of authentic self-discovery. Campbell knew that this integration is perhaps the most difficult part of the entire journey, because it requires you to embody what you've learned without losing it, to share your insights without diminishing them, to remain connected to your deepest truth while engaging fully with a world that often seems to have forgotten such truth exists. The person who returns from this inner odyssey carries what Campbell called the elixir, not a magical potion, but a way of being that has the power to heal others simply through its presence. But here's the paradox. The more profound your transformation, the less dramatic it may appear to others. You don't return from authentic self-discovery with superpowers or special abilities. You return with something far more powerful and far more practical, the capacity to be fully present to whatever life brings, without needing it to be different than it is. You return with the ability to love without attachment, to work without desperation, to succeed without arrogance, to fail without devastation. You return as someone who has learned the difference between being in the world and being of the world. The external circumstances of your life may look remarkably similar to what they were before your journey began, but you inhabit them from a completely different center of gravity. The same job that once felt like a prison becomes a place where you can offer your authentic gifts. The same relationships that once drained your energy become opportunities for genuine connection. The same challenges that once overwhelmed you become invitations to practice the wisdom you've gained. This is why Campbell insisted that the hero's journey isn't about escaping the ordinary world. It's about transforming your relationship to it. You still participate in the same basic human activities, working, relating, creating, resting, but you do so from a place of conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion. You're no longer driven by the need to prove your worth or escape your mortality. You're no longer seeking in others what you've learned to find within yourself. You're no longer fighting battles that were never yours to fight. Campbell understood that this is how real change happens in the world, not through dramatic gestures or revolutionary manifestos, but through the quiet transformation of individual consciousness, one person at a time. When you live from authentic presence rather than reactive conditioning, you create a field of possibility around you that others can feel even if they can't name it. Your peace becomes their permission to stop performing for approval. Your joy becomes their reminder that happiness doesn't have to be earned or achieved. It can simply be chosen, moment by moment, as a way of moving through the world. But perhaps the most profound aspect of this return is what Campbell called the freedom to live. This isn't freedom from responsibility or commitment. Quite the opposite. It's the freedom that comes from knowing who you are so clearly that you no longer need to spend energy defending, justifying, or promoting yourself. It's the freedom that emerges when you stop trying to become someone and start expressing who you already are. It's the freedom of no longer needing life to validate your existence because you've learned to validate it from within. This freedom isn't selfish. It's the most generous gift you can offer the world, because when you're no longer driven by unconscious needs and fears, when you're no longer trying to extract something from others to fill the emptiness inside yourself, you become capable of authentic service. Not service born from guilt or obligation, but service that flows naturally from the recognition that your well-being and everyone else's well-being are intimately connected. Campbell spent his life studying the mythic patterns that connect all human cultures, and what he discovered is that the journey toward authenticity isn't optional. It's the fundamental purpose of human existence. We're all called to this adventure of becoming who we really are. Beneath all the layers of conditioning and expectation, some answer the call consciously, embracing the challenges and rewards of intentional transformation. Others resist until life forces the journey upon them through crisis or loss, or the simple accumulation of years of living inauthentically. But whether we choose it or have it chosen for us, the journey toward authentic selfhood is the one adventure that every human life offers. And when you accept that adventure, everything changes. Not because your external world necessarily transforms, but because you transform, and you discover that you were never separate from that world at all.